Well, good morning, everyone. It is Friday. We are on reflection number 3 of our series going through the 10 Commandments. And I hope you have enjoyed the last two. Uh, please give us some feedback. It would be great. It would be appreciated. We are wanting to improve, but please be kind and gracious. So I want to begin today's reflection with a story. So sit back, make yourself comfortable. When I was round about, let's say, between the ages of 7 and 13, and during the summer holidays when my mum was at work, I needed to be looked after. Now, the lucky people who got to look after me were my nine and Tide, or my nan and grandad. But not that this is burnt into my memory. It's a memory all the same, but it has stayed with me. You see, I was watching TV, and this was a luxury, as I was only allowed to watch TV at my Nine and Tide house for about 2 hours per day. I was there, but that was okay because I had loads of other things to do, and I often spent a lot of time with my Tide in his shed, helping him fix things and make things. Anyway, I was watching TV and something shocked me. Now, in my shock, I sort of screamed out, "Oh my God!" And it's almost as though I'm there now. I'm picturing it. From within the kitchen, I heard like the knife hit the chopping board. Almost instantaneously, as soon as I'd said that, I heard my name being called out, beckoning me in from my nine, from the kitchen. But at the time, I didn't understand why. All I heard or noticed was my name being called in a tone that I'm sure you're all aware of disapproval and a little hint of anger. But, well, I walked into the kitchen, and by the time I got there, my Tide was down from the shed, and my nine and my Tide were stood next to each other, and I'll never forget it. They turned my Tide with my nine looking at him like this. He turned round and pointed at me and said, "Paid a cam ddefnyddio enw'r arglwydd dy Dduw." And it was accompanied by a wrist slap. Now, my nine and Tide were solid believers in Christ Jesus, and they took their faith and their belief very serious, and they had a great reverence for God and his name. I don't think at that point I understood what was going on, but as I grew older and made the same mistake a few more times in front of them, the message sank in, and it was understood that I shouldn't be saying, "Oh my God." Now, as I got older, and I found myself, I myself became a believer, not long after my wrist slapping, my understanding began to change in relation to this particular commandment, because that is what it is. It's a commandment. Is there such a thing as the worst sin? That is worse than all the others. Well, there is, and I know I might get some, let's say, feedback on this, but you might have heard it said, you cannot declare any sin worse than any other because all are equal before God. To God, a sin is a sin. That is the way it is often expressed. And in this view, a person who steals something from the office, let's say, is committing as grievous a sin in God's eyes as a murderer. But most people intuitively, as well as biblically, understand that some sins are clearly worse than others. We are confident, and my understanding of God is that he has much more common sense than we do. Does it make sense that God equates that someone stealing office supplies with murder? I don't think so. So then what is the worst sin? Well, this is what I want to consider for this morning, is the worst sin is committing evil in God's name. How do we know? Well, from the third commandment, from the 10 commandments. This is the only one of the 10 commandments that God says he will not forgive a person who violates the commandment. What does the commandment say? It is almost commonly translated to say, "Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless who misuses his name." Most people understandably think that the commandment forbids people from saying the Lord's name for no good reason. Like, oh my God, I have had such a tough day in work. It violates the third commandment, right? But that interpretation or that understanding presents a real problem. It would mean that whereas if God could forgive the violation of any of the other commandments, dishonouring one's parents, stealing, adultery, or even committing murder, would never forgive someone who said, "Oh my God, I have had such a bad day at work today." Because let's be honest, that would render God and the 10 Commandments morally incomprehensible. Well, as it happens, the commandment is not the problem. The problem is often the translation. The original Hebrew does not say, "do not take." It says, "do not carry." The implications are majorly different. The Hebrew literally translates to, "do not carry the name of the Lord in vain." One of the most widely used translations of the Bible, the NIV, uses the word misuse rather than the word take. You should not misuse the name of the Lord your God in vain. This is much closer to the original's intent. But what does it mean to carry or to misuse the Lord's name? Well, it means committing evil in God's name. And that is what God will not forgive. Why not? Well, when an irreligious person commits evil, it doesn't bring God and religion. It brings God and religion into disrepute. But when religious people commit evil, especially in God's name, they are not just committing evil. They are doing terrible damage to the name of God and his reputation. It shouldn't take you long to think of a few modern day examples where things are done in the name of God that are so backward and blatantly a fabrication. To meet someone else's needs, or to satisfy someone's craving, or to have control, to seek control. Now, it is not coincidental that what is called the new atheism, this immense explosion of atheist activism after such things and events like 9/11, that's just one example. The fact that that was done in the name of God in some sects of the Islam faith. The most frequent argument against God concerns the evil committed in God's name. whether it was done in the name of Allah today and in the past done in the name of Christ. Were you aware that the Crusades and Nazi Germany employed large numbers of German Protestant Lutheran church clergy and used the church as propaganda? Did you know that the commanding officers during the Crusades rallied men to fight in the sacking of Jerusalem by claiming, if you join the fight for this noble cause, you will earn your place in heaven? Evil sold and dressed in sheep's clothing. People who murder in the name of God not only kill their victims, they kill God's reputation too, in the eyes of the non-believers. That's why the greatest sin is religious evil. That's what the third commandment is there to teach. So what can this mean for us today? What is life going to be like post-COVID-19? What is God calling you to do, to carry on with post-COVID-19? But a few questions on top of that one. When was the last time you used the term God has told me? When was the last time you heard someone else say, God has told me? God has told that we should do this or that? I want you to imagine a deck of cards and you are playing your favourite game. But there is a difference. There is one card in the deck that has all the power and cannot be questioned. It's called the God card. And whoever plays it wins. You see, because the name of God carries with it a lot of power, a lot of weight. And no believing person wants to go against the potential word or instruction given by God. God told me to do it. God has asked me to do this. God is telling me. He's telling you, he's telling us to focus on this. God is showing me, he's showing you, he's showing us to go in this particular direction. Now, please understand, what I'm not saying is that those things are evil. They might be very well and good, and may well be of God. They might very well be exactly what we need to do. However, I want to encourage you to test what you have heard, seen, felt from God. Now, how do you test these things? Well, firstly, you pray. Now, prayer it's a conversation. It's not you just throwing up your petitions to God and then letting him get on with it behind the scenes. It's actually a two-way thing. So when you speak and when you ask God for stuff, expect an answer and silence yourself. Practice silence in prayer. It's a real joy and it's a real discipline and it takes time, but quieten yourself down, make yourself silent and listen. I often think of Andy Hughes when he turns around and says, God's given you one mouth and two ears, therefore you should listen twice as much as you speak. The next thing you can do is see if it lines up with the Bible. If it doesn't line up with the Bible, or if the Bible doesn't mention it or speak anything of it, then you would look for a guiding principle. Now, to do this, you can seek help in finding this guiding principle from your leaders, elders, or other believers that you trust, and that those people have a good grasp of the Bible. Now, if it turns out that what you have heard contradicts what the Bible says, then you can guarantee it isn't God given. Other things you can do is meditate, fast, and, as I mentioned before, practice silence. Now, in closing, I said earlier that breaking this commandment is the worst sin, and it is unforgivable. And I will leave you with 2 questions for you to think about, ponder, wonder. And they are, and hopefully you're expecting this, is where does Jesus fit in all this? Does this line up with our understanding of salvation? If what I have said is true. That should be enough for you to get your teeth stuck into. Well, hopefully I've given you something to think about. Hopefully I haven't infuriated you to the point where your blood is boiling and steam isn't coming out of your ears. But engage with this one. This should be a bit of fun. So I'm going to leave it there. Have a great day, everyone.